Welcome to the Pinnacle Rio Major Roundtable. My name is TechGirl. I'm your host, and I'm joined by a bunch of familiar faces and voices in the Counter-Strike community. B-Dog and Hawker are here with us, NaToSaphiX as well, and NBK, and we are here to chat about the Rio Major, specifically focusing on the Legends stage. But before we do that, gents, shall we talk about how everyone's pick'ems were absolutely horribly wrong for challenges, B-Dog, and we all basically need to just throw our notebooks out the window?
It was squeaky bum time indeed, wasn't it? I think I had every single 2-2 game. I needed one team to win, and I just about got it over the line with Cloud9 when we all said here, oh yeah, 3-0, pretty easy. And then they go 0-2. They lost to the boys. It feels a bit rough, right? But it was close. There was some really cool storylines like such as Gamer Legion and Fnatic both going 2-0, then going into the 2-2 bucket. I feel like that was a little bit unexpected, but for Fnatic, they just about get it over the line. I think they deserve to be in that legend spot, so I'm happy for them.
I'm happy for Fnatic as well, and we'll talk about them in a bit. But Nato, I do think the challenges stage really sets up this major, and I wonder, do you think it is going to be very open ended based on what we've just seen? Any team's chance to win it?
I mean, it's not any team's chance, it will never be, right? But when we looked at the challenger stage, there were some very clear favorites to make it through, and there were also ones where I feel like we quite comfortably could sit and say, I mean, I said it after the recording was done, like Serious Nation, I kind of expected them to go 0-3. We expected Greyhound to go 0-3. They didn't. They went 1-3, beating only Cloud9. In this stage of the tournament, though, you still have clear favorites to take the trophy, right? But I would say it's a much more even spread in terms of who actually makes it to the playoffs. And I think there will be way more differing opinions today than we had last time, where we were all a little bit on the same kind of vibe, you know?
I'm hoping for a little bit of a debate. MBK, any surprises for you making it through to the Legends?
In terms of names, I guess not that much because, yeah, they were mostly expected. But I think it's more the fashion that some teams went through. BNE, for example, just smashed their way in 3-0, where they were struggling a little bit on the internet before that. And then the likes of Vitality, Cloud9, really just not showing up at their highest level. I think that's more the thing. Like, overall, I think the names made sense. But yeah, it's more about the way they went through and how it's going to translate now into the later stages when they're like potentially favorites of the whole tournament. So that's what's really interesting, I think.
So Hawker is actually in Rio right now. We got to see you on the desk as well. So you've been working this event. Tell us what's the vibe like? I'm presuming you're getting a chance to see some of the players behind the scenes. I mean, what is the vibe like? What's the attitude amongst the players?
Yeah, it's all pretty serious from them. It's been cool to see just everyone chilling around the hotel. I think most of the teams are arriving now for the next stage too, so that's good. In general, I think it definitely seems like there is a bit of a difference between the games on the main stream where you get the big crowd and then the ones on the B stream where you are not in front of the crowd. It seems like those are a little more relaxed and you don't have as many of the same massive upsets all the time. It's more just, I think, the intensity of the mainstream matches, because it definitely comes across on stream how ridiculous this crowd is. But when you see it in person, it's almost more ridiculous how it's like 9 a.m. on a Monday and they're just going crazy as they enter the door. It's really cool to see. So I think the crowd has been the biggest thing for me, because obviously every team has come in like fully prepared, wanting to do what they can do best. And then you have the crowd that kind of affects things weirdly and maybe is something they're not used to so early on.
Nato, do you think that has a big impact on a lot of the players as well? Maybe not expecting that sort of crowd so early on in the competition?
I mean, it will definitely have an effect on some players, but one of the players I want to say is like a super highlight standout player for me is Sertian. He's like a young guy coming in. He's like 18 years old, first time playing a major, first time playing this kind of big stages, and had one of the best performances. I'm sure we'll revisit it later in the podcast as well. But there will be those specific players that get extra nervous and who are not used to it. But there are also those players where even if they're young, sort of inexperienced, the crowd pumping them up will, like, instead of making them nervous, it will actually make them perform better. And I think it's always a little bit of a mixed bag. The same way we can talk about do the Brazilian teams get a boost from the crowd or not? In football and stuff, it's typical that the crowd boosts you and playing at home is a help. But I feel like actually typically in Counter-Strike, we see the crowd, being a detriment to the teams because they feel extra pressure to perform.
Yeah, I think as well with JDC, how he performed in Cologne and how he thrived off the crowd. It's going to be interesting to see how the crowd really affects the teams going forward, because obviously you've got Furia in the mix in the Legend stage, but I think some of the Brazilians were saying, we're just going to pick a team. And I feel like that's where the different jerseys kind of coming into combination with the color schemes. I feel like that those little minor details could actually go a long way.
This is the thing, right, though, because, I mean, as you mentioned it, how does the crowd benefit the Brazilians? And I think there was a lot of talk, I know, because I fed this narrative as well, about how, being at home on home soil is going to be really good. Brazilian teams, though, not doing all that well, NBK. We've only got Furia left. And I mean, what do we think their chances are in the Legends stage?
I really hope they go to playoffs, because I think the arena for that is going to be mental if they get there. Now, there is just the brutal fact of the Counter-Strike level that you show while in the game. It's not only the crowd, not only the way you play and all of that. I don't know. I think they're just borderline on like that top 8 where they can make it, but if they get like the wrong matchups, it can really go either way. And that's also what happens with the initial matchups. Like you have like the big names and stuff like that, but like it means they won't face each other later in the best of 3 stages, and so it puts Furia into a bit of a disadvantage in that sense. But overall, I think it's just the level of the teams has kind of been respected, where you have the teams that played better, went through, and the teams that didn't play as well just didn't, crowd or not. Whether you want it or not, like, it doesn't really matter. It's just there's that brutality of, do you play good Counter-Strike, do you not play good Counter-Strike, and then in best of 3s it really shows up. And I think the Brazilian teams were just lacking in that department, and except Furia, that is like the one standout team in Brazil you have right now. So I have high hopes for their sake, for their life, for their achievements and everything. I really hope they make it to the playoffs, but I think for them it's just going to be borderline.
Holger, do you think the crowd will, I mean, obviously the crowd will care if Furia gets knocked out. They'll be sad. But what has it been like when you're on the ground there? Are they getting behind other teams? Do you think that the crowd will care if there's no Brazilians when they move into playoffs? Do you think they'll just support one of the other teams?
Yeah, basically the way it's been explained to me is like they will just normally pick another one of the teams and just decide, we're going to fully get behind this team now. And that's what will happen, basically. So like the Vitality chant was being sung by the Brazilian crowd. So I think they are just going to, basically it seems like, the way I describe it is, in Brazil, it seems like they come to these sporting events and it's like a party atmosphere for everyone. Everyone's just like enjoying being there, enjoying the event, enjoying Counter-Strike, and then they will just support other teams when it gets to that point. But obviously, as long as Furia are in the tournament, they are still going to be the main team that are kind of cheered for.
How long does Furia stay in the tournament, though, Hawker?
I don't know. I don't know if they make it through this stage, sadly. I think it's really close, but I feel like some of the other teams might just have a bit more to their game overall than a Furia, who are maybe a little more, I don't want to say one note, but you kind of know more what you're going to expect from them. Whereas some of the other teams, I think, just have a bit more to them. I think Furia's best chance is maybe just to try and catch fire early, because like NBK was saying, there's a lot of the top teams going up against each other early. So they might actually have to just come out and try and 3-0 this stage, which might be possible. But I'd be scared if they go into a 2-2 game. I think there's a pretty good chance they get like a really hard matchup. And I don't know if they can make it in that sort of scenario.
B-Dog, I mean, obviously Hawker there mentioned the initial matchups. I think that the first 2 look like major semi-finals, never mind group stage type of setups. I mean, we're going to get some epic Counter-Strike, but it is quite scary that that's what's going to kickstart the Legend stage.
It is, and it's a fact that you can have kind of these fringe teams. Here, Furia isn't a fringe team, but you could have potentially another run where some teams that aren't expected to kind of make it through comfortably just go on this 3-0 start, because you're going to be you're going to have already like a Vitality or a Na'Vi, a FaZe or a Cloud9. You could even throw Liquid in the conversation, maybe dropping down into the 1-1 bracket early. I mean, your outsiders, Heroic later on. I mean, these are some blockbuster best of ones, and they are the opening matchups for the Legend stage. It's going to throw it all into disarray. That's what makes it so difficult. But I feel like if you take a look at kind of the other teams on the end of things, like if Sprout, for example, get off to a good start and they beat Big then get thrown into this pool, and I'm not sure whether they're going to have enough to really get through.
I tell you what, let's put you all on the spot. We'll start with Nato. Who do you think goes 3-0?
Well, the ones that I've picked in my pick'ems is maybe not the ones I expect to go 3-0 necessarily. I've picked NIP. The reason is that we saw them go 3-0 at the RMR, and we have seen so little from the new lineup with Alexi B that I don't feel comfortable putting them at the bottom of my pick'ems, because I actually don't know. Maybe they just suck. We actually don't know. Maybe they had just one good tournament and now they just suck. But it could also be that they keep up the form that they had, and if they do so, maybe they go 3-0. So I think they have their opening match against Fnatic, if I'm not mistaken, and I see that as an absolute win for them. If they don't win that, then they're not gonna make it, I think. But if they do win that, they get a pretty good start. And for a lot of the other teams who I would normally go for in the 3-0, if I were to pick like a FaZe or an Avi or something like that, they have really tough matchups as the opening matchup, as you just touched on. So for my pickers, I've decided to go with NIP. I don't know if they are exactly the ones that I would expect. I would probably, if I were picking not in the pick'ems, I would pick FaZe.
Hawker, how about you?
Yeah, I think for my pick'em, I put Heroic maybe, just because they're the sort of team that always seem to do pretty well in groups. But if I was picking the actual team, I would say it just feels like a FaZe might just lose a BO1 somewhere. I don't know why. I have that feeling. I might say like a Na'Vi. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I'll say a Na'Vi. Why not? I think I'm hoping that Na'Vi come in with a feeling like they really want to prove themselves, especially Simple. I feel like he should be coming in and trying to prove that he's still the best player in the world, because everyone's been talking about ZywOo. So that's what I'm banking on. Simple's just going to come in and just mess everyone else up.
We're going to go through everyone. NBK, how about you? Who's your 3-0?
I'm going to throw a different one maybe, but I can see Mouse really making it 3-0 and just smashing this part of the stage. I think they're playing very sound Counter-Strike, like very clear cut. They know what they're doing and they're just executing it. They're still warm from like the first stage, like they know the area, the atmosphere, they know everything, so they're really comfortable with it. The individuals are popping up as well. They have a good opening against Liquid. I think they're good favorites there, and I think it can just take the first day, crush it. They have also one of the highest seed of the challengers, or whatever it's called, and so it gives them like reasonable opponents, I think. And so, for example, if Sprout wins big, I can see like a Mouse against Sprout or some stuff like that, and so they can very quickly go 2-0, and then it's just one best of 3 away. How hard is it to win a best of 3, right? So it's just I don't know. I like the way they approach Counter-Strike. I like the way they play. I like the firepower. So I could really see them. And then further in the playoffs is a different question, but I can really see them go 3-0.
B-Dog?
Oh, see, that's kind of selling me a bit. I've gone for NIP in my 3-0 for my pick'ems, but because I don't like rate them enough to be on the bottom as a safe pick, just because I just don't know what I'm going to get from them. Is Rez still going to be good on the up? I don't know. So we'll see. I've put them there because it's like they're a team that can make it through, but I don't know. If we're talking about actual teams, I think we'll go 3-0. I'm in the camp of Na'Vi and Heroic. I feel like Heroic have looked very solid coming into the RMR as well. Like they won out their best of 3s. Had to win a couple to get there to the Legend stage, but they did, and it looked quite dominant. I really like the way that they were approaching the game, especially the way that they were using Yabi recently as well, just putting him more in the X Factor positions. Like on Inferno, they were always boosting him up. They were always like baiting him in towards Pit on CT side, and they're just kind of making sure he has multi-frag potential, and he's really thriving in that environment recently. So there's a strong case for Heroic to have a very deep run here at the Major.
So you've basically given me a buffet of things, and now I'm going to pick at them and ask you a bunch of questions. MBK, is this the Major where Simple proves that he's still the best in the world, or is it going to be ZywOo's origin story?
I mean, ZywOo is just showing again great things, but I think all the pieces around him are not like very well put together at the moment. Like there's just a dip in form for some reason. Like they peaked at Pro League, and now for some reason things are just, it's not the same team that we saw at that time. Whereas Navi, I think they kind of really had a good group well together, although there are like chances that they change players and stuff like that, like with SDY being like potentially his last tournament with the group. So it's kind of the last thing where it's just like, fuck it, we just go for it, and like everything goes out the window, and then Simple just does whatever he wants to do. And I think it's a possibility because I haven't seen a lot of teams playing super clean Counter-Strike either. And if you throw in Simple in the middle of that, like he can just explode and like just take over a game. So I think there is a good chance for him to like go further than Vitality. But in terms of level, I think the two are just so high currently, like above all the others, that it's going to be a battle between the two of them, and like whoever's team I think is going to go further is going to be like the one that is going to be able to show more than the other.
Hawker, do you think Vitality has the benefit of that they've had a week in Rio to play? They're used to the crowd. They've kind of warmed up, if you like. I mean, obviously the Na'Vi roster very experienced, but there is an opportunity to kind of settle into the job for Vitality. Will we be able to see that level of play we saw from them during Pro League?
It's interesting because I would say it was in that last BO3 that they almost looked more shaky than at other times in the tournament, weirdly. Like the team play in some of those rounds and the timings looked really, really off for them. And if they didn't have a couple of the individual moments where players stepped up, that series against OG could have actually been really sketchy. I think that ZywOo scout round honestly changed a whole lot on that final map. And then obviously the first map was super close too. So I'm kind of not sure how to feel about that, because there's part of me that is a little concerned about that, but there's also part of me that says, I think that's the worst the team play is going to get for this team, and they still were able to grind out the win. So it's almost like one of those scenarios where you almost think to yourself, okay, so they're not playing their best CS, but they're still grinding out the wins there. Now they have a couple of days to reset. I do think they should be able to make it through this stage still. Just the players, I think, should be good enough, and you still have ZywOo. But I still don't think this team is championship caliber yet. I just don't quite see it coming together yet.
Nato, I want to chat to you about Heroic, and I'm probably going to be in trouble for saying this because I do this to them all the time. But I feel like Heroic is always the bridesmaid, never the bride. That they always get hyped up before we get into events. Everyone talks about how great Heroic is, and then I just don't think they quite deliver. They never quite get down the aisle. Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, there was a moment there in the sort of online era of COVID where they were definitely the bride. At least they were taking a lot of trophies. But there's been this change, obviously, to LAN Counter-Strike. Now it's been a while. It almost feels like ancient history in some sense. But I do think, like, for me, Heroic are a team where in the last majors, I guess starting with Stockholm, I was not expecting a whole lot from them. And if my memory serves me right, I do think they made the semi-final, and then I think they lost to G2 or something like that. And I feel like actually Heroic, they are performing above my expectations for them at the majors, which I think is a really good sign. With that said, though, I do think that the Heroic lineup we have currently is, in my opinion, the worst Heroic lineup we've had in a year. I don't feel like I'm seeing consistency. I don't feel like I'm seeing, I think Yabi is doing a decent job, but there's something missing there in that team. And from what we can kind of assume with Refresh now transitioning into an IGL role in Sprout, and also from what I've heard from, for example, Peacemaker, who was coaching Refresh in the past, is he always said about Refresh, he thought he was an amazing player because he was good at giving service info. And what he meant with that is that Refresh has a lot of lurk roles, and if he's playing, for example, Monster on Overpass, he will be like basically calling on his side of the map. So he will say like, they did a smoke from here, and so the guy is probably here, so when we go, we need to use a flash so that, or maybe he doesn't do the whole explanation, but he will at least say, we do a flash here, do that, and then I go in and take this running pattern and boom, And if you have a player like that who is so good at reading the game, and a lurk who is able to call his side of the map, that helps set up the rounds, and it gives you more info, like if he's counting smokes, if he's, I heard that he's probably, or I've watched on a demo that, all these things, it will benefit you massively on your T sides. And I just don't see Yabi doing the same. I don't know too much about Yabi, so maybe I'm being harsh on him as well. And maybe it's not even Yabi's fault at all, but just it feels like that dimension is missing for Heroic. They were always super unpredictable, and I feel like now when I see them, where before they were a little bit like I don't know, a lion hiding in a jungle. You never knew what you could expect. All of a sudden, they would just pounce, and it would be super random. Now it's like they've been tamed, and I feel like it's, even though I think the core of Shush Thesis Down is super strong, and I actually think Cadian is also doing a good job. He's also picked up his individual performance as of late. I just feel like Yabi was not the missing piece, and I have them to go through this stage, but I don't have them to go far. So I'm basically in the same boat as you. They will, I hope, make it, but I don't see them contending for the trophy whatsoever.
B-Dog, do you think that they're a major winning squad yet, or do you agree with Nato?
I don't think that they're major winners yet. However, I from what I saw and from what I spoke to Cadian briefly during the RMRs, and he said that the Yabi development phase of the team, they're a lot more structurally further along than he actually anticipated, and as a result, they're just gonna play like with the same mentality, and they're just gonna see how they keep going at this major. I don't think the expectation for Heroic in themselves as an organization is to obviously win this, but I think it's playoffs, obviously a minimum, try and make it through to the top 4. Can they do that? It's going to be very difficult. In my opinion, I don't think they're there quite yet. But if Cadian himself is saying, well, we're actually further along than we anticipated to be, then I feel like that's only good signs for this side. I feel like that means that they are gelling together that little bit more. And if they are further along the development train, then that means that they've had time to work and refine a little bit more coming into this major. So I feel like maybe they've got a trick or two up their sleeve that we're not quite anticipating yet. So I'm excited to see what they can bring to the table, because I feel like Heroic, they're still somewhat of an unknown entity with Yabi. And I feel like just the games that I watched in the RMR, the way that they were trying to set Yabi up a little bit differently, it was working out in their favor a lot more. So I'm kind of on the fence. I'm going to be honest. I'm not too sure how they're going to be. To answer your question, they're not a major winning side at the moment, but I hope that they will be in the future.
I just think Heroic lets me down all the time, so I've given up hope. That's how I feel. I'm not supposed to have an opinion, but there you go. I do have an opinion
Fair
about.
enough.
I have an opinion about Fnatic though, and Hawker. I'm not going to share it because we all know I'm a Fnatic fangirl. But what do you think their opportunities and chances are as we go into the Legend stage?
I think it's tough for them in this stage. It's tough just because the rest of the competition is so strong. You look down the list of teams, and they've got some good players. They're capable of winning 1 or 2 games here, but it's so hard to see them making it through. And I watched the series against outsiders specifically, and that fully felt like a series where I got the first chance to realize that this team maybe needs a bit more experience, and that Mezzi as a caller still needs a little longer, because they just didn't know how to play against this outsiders team. They just completely got lost in that series. And yes, sometimes it is hard to play against outsiders, but it's almost like they were kind of trying to play an outsiders-esque style a little bit, because they picked the overpass, they played that, and then the information was just against them fully the entire time. So even though they've got a couple of really good players, and Roy can definitely win you a map, Fasha has shown those glimpses of what he can do, they just feel like a team that aren't quite there yet. And I was hoping maybe they would be, because they looked really, really good initially once this team came together. I think I'm starting to see some of the cracks in this stage, sadly.
Let's change the subject a little bit now, and this is always the fun one. Who do you think goes 0-3, Nato?
Ooh, we start with me.
Of course, because it's fun.
Well, I have picked someone that I think no one else here has picked, maybe. Well, I think best of ones in the major is garbage. And I think a lot of the results that we saw here in the challenger stage was due to the best of ones. I don't think Cloud9 loses a best of 3 against Greyhound, let's be real. I don't think that there's multiple examples. One of the teams that I think enjoys the best of ones a lot is a team with a lot of good energy, and that is Bad News Eagles. Even though they went 3-0, I've decided to put them 0-3 in this stage, because I do actually view them as the weakest team from the lineup. They have surprised me every single time I've seen them play, basically. So I might be completely off, and for some reason I have a very skewed perspective of them. But I feel like if it was best of threes the whole way, I would put them 0-3. And just for my own sort of sake, I'm gonna take the team I view as the sort of weakest. The other one I have for a potential 0-3 is unfortunately Sprout, but I love them so much that I could not put them 0-3. And I think also for them it depends on if they lose to Big. I actually see them going 0-3. Obviously, if they win against Big, they won't go 0-3. But I think that's a really big match. And having been in Sprout, I know how much the like German rivalry means to them. Like if they win, they're going out for Brazilian barbecue for like a week after that match. I know it. So the pressure on them is enormous, and not that anyone's forcing it on them, but they know that they make the right people very happy if they win this match. So I think there will be so much added pressure on Sprout, who are still young and sort of inexperienced, whereas Big, on the other hand, a little bit more used to the pressure. I think always performing pretty well at the major. So I think that match will be super key. But yeah, I have Sprout and Bad News Eagles, unfortunately.
Bad News Eagles and Sprout. MBK, how about you?
Yeah, to add to those Sprout points, Big are very good in best of ones as well. They always come up with like tricks and like game plans, like they're there in the moment, and they're one of the best teams in best of one. So yeah, it's gonna be the same for me. I think I really love Sprout. I love some of the players. Lonix is my guy through and through, but it's just very hard to see them coming in on stage and just smash it the way they've been doing it in like all the studio events and online. It could work very well. They could embrace it, but that's a bit of a question mark. All the other teams, they're like seasoned and they know and like they're gonna handle all of it. Whereas with Sprout, it's a big question mark. I don't know what's gonna happen with that, and so I want them to do well, but the competition is so harsh and fierce, and everything is good. Like every single thing is gonna matter, and so I do think they have the skill, the talent. I don't think they're there as a team yet. They're like very sound in the way they approach Counter-Strike, but I think it's not developed enough, first of all, to face against all the best teams, even though they've beaten some of them. I still think it's going to be hard for them to like just get there straight. And so if you put them at 0-2 against the likes of Fnatic, Bad News Eagle, yeah, they definitely have a better chance, but I still think they might be lacking that small thing to have that whole cohesion, like that constant minimum level that is going to be there, and like they can't lose against those kind of teams. And they're the kind of team that need to upset in every game, basically. So it's I don't know. I want him to succeed, but it's hard. Like some teams have to lose at some point, and so I think Sprout is just not in the prime position to do it right now.
Your heart wants to cheer for Sprout, but your head knows that it's probably going to be an uphill battle. Hawker, before we get your 0-3 predictions, I'm curious, have you been for a Brazilian barbecue yet, seeing as you're hanging out here?
I actually haven't, which is a big disappointment. Maybe that's going to have to be on the list today. I know.
Just go. Just go right now.
Disappointing. Yeah, just see your podcast. I'm done. Yeah, I think for my 0-3, I have to also go with Sprout, sadly. The thing is, I kind of agree with NATO that Bad News Eagles might be the weakest team here, but they're just so good in BO1s at playing this really like group together style sometimes, and just coming in and someone might not fully prepare for them. It is really hard to pick the 0-3 here though, because Sprout did so well in the RMRs and they have some really good players. So that's one of the things I love about this stage, is that there's no like obvious 0-3 picks. I mean, I know our obvious 0-3 picks didn't really work last time, but this time there's really no obvious 0-3 picks. So I feel like most people are maybe going to go for Sprout. And I wouldn't be surprised if they just win that opening game against Big. I really agree. That opening game, I think, is the most important one. I have Big as slight favorites, but if Sprout win that, then maybe they could make something happen.
B-Dog, last one to tell us. Who do you think is going to go 0-3?
I think Sprout's winning that best of one. I think Big go 0-3.
I could see
what?
it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, look, our 0-3s were tragic last time, so I'm going against the grain a bit, and I just think Sprout can win that best of one. I did the matchup simulator thing, and I've got Big going 0-3, and I look at the team for Big, and like, yeah, Searson's playing incredibly well on LAN. That's always been the narrative, right? Can he do it on LAN? Well, he is. And then you got Crimbo, you got Sin, you got Keto. For me, I I don't really like the team. I just don't like how it's made up. So they've got 0-3 for me.
I mean, Nato, how do you feel about Big?
Well, I mean, I don't think this is the most exciting Big we've seen. There's like sort of a lack of personality to it in a way. It's like a little bit of a quiet team. I mean, it's not like they're doing a whole lot social media wise, and I don't have any special relation to them because I'm not German, or something like that. I think they have some cool players like Syrson and Tapson, always exciting to watch. But for example, I mean, I was teammates with Fabian, and if he would have been on the team, maybe my feelings for it would have been a bit different. But I think there were times where Big were an actual contender, maybe not for the trophy, but where you were thinking they're going to make playoffs time and time again. There was the Krakow Major 2017, where they, I think, made the semifinal as well. And like where Big are right now, they are filler. Like, I'm happy with having them there. I will watch the matches. They do come up with some really cool tricks, as Nathan said. But I don't get excited for a big matchup. Like, it's the other team that has to sell that match for me to really get excited for it.
Let's get a little bit spicy now. NBK, best of ones in a major. Rubbish. Should we get rid of them?
Yeah, it's a conversation that pops up a ton, obviously. I personally love best of ones. I think there is a real value to it, and it's not just, oh yeah, you have 3 maps, you're gonna get comfortable with the first map. No, it's like, yes, there's a bit more randomness, but why not? Why not? Randomness can be sometimes a part of it. What I don't like is the fact that the Swiss system should be used for like 10 different matchups. So like 10 different rounds instead of just 3. I think that's the problem. But if you do Swiss system with like 10 matchups, then I think it makes a lot of sense. And like, you can play best of one, you have a lot of games, it's exciting. It's like best of one, you need to be in there in the moment. You have like crazy overtime games and all of that. I think that then makes a lot of sense. And you can do like, for example, like a TI kind of scenario where you have like 2 groups of 12 teams or 6 or whatever you want at the major. And then you have like a big bracket with like upper bracket, lower bracket. And so you have like, you're just contending for things no matter what, like upper or lower bracket. And so I think that's how they should be used. So I'm not against best of one. It's just best of one's the way they're used right now, I think, are not optimal. I think it just doesn't really add too much to the value. So that's where I stand. I'm in the middle, but like best of ones, great, exciting, I think, to watch. Like, you have like, the likes of the games like Greyhound against Cloud9. I think it's like a good example. Like, you have a ton of example where underdogs can come in and like, it makes the game exciting. If the favorite wins all the time, there's no point in watching games. You're just like, whatever, we just watch the big games. Best of ones add a bit of randomness and fun to it. So sometimes it's heartbreaking when you play them, but it's a part of the deal, right? You want everyone to watch Counter-Strike at the end of the day. So that's where I see, well, like with that whole debate of both of them. But yeah, best of 3 is for brackets, 100% should be the best team coming out that worked the most on the most maps and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I saw you nodding there. You got anything to add to the best of one debate?
Yeah, I just think I agree that the issue is you have the BO1s and you also have the really bad seeding. Like, we should not be having Vitality against Na'Vi as an opening matchup. I actually think the seeding is more of the bigger problem, because if it was, I don't know, let's say FaZe versus Sprout, we'll say, who would maybe be the lowest seed, then I think it's highly likely that you're still going to get the favorites win a bunch of those BO1s. I just think that you have the awkward seeding, which makes it really tricky, because it's going to make it a little easier for a team to just go on a run with some of these opening matchups. And also, I agree, I think it's also a bit more exciting just as a viewer to get a couple of BO1s in there early. It just allows you to get a glimpse of all the teams early on if you haven't really got a chance to see them. And it's a little easier to just, tune in for a BO1 than say a full BO3 if you're just getting into the tournament. So I think for the viewers, I think it makes sense. Obviously, the teams are always going to have their say with how it might not be quite as competitive. But I think there has to be a balance. And I do think for viewers, it's nice to have the BO1s early on.
Talking about viewers, there's some American ones. So maybe we need to focus on their hopes and dreams. And I'm hoping maybe one of you will share to them. B-Dog, chances for Liquid going into this?
I've got pretty high aspirations for Liquid, I'm going to be honest. I feel like that they've been a completely different team since Yakinda's come in. The fact that his future's now certain with them, I'm sure it kind of was behind the scenes, but it's been made official now. He's going to be there. And they've just looked a lot better. And the fact that when he first joined the team, Elige was saying, wow, we've really got some catch up to do. Yakinda's been bringing us up to speed. And for me, I feel like they've been improving event on event. And it's that consistency that I feel like that will have them having a very deep major run here. I can definitely see it, and I'm excited to watch them, to be honest, because they've now had time since their last event. They can be practicing the entire time. I know that they were boot camping in EU, so it's exciting to see how they're going to perform. I think that there's good hope for NA.
NBK, how about you? What are your thoughts on Liquid?
It's hard to say because the way they showed up at the RMR, I think, wasn't convincing at all. Despite having like the second place at Pro League just before that, where they played very, very well. Now they had a bit of time to reflect on how they want to approach it. And I still think there needs to be some deeper connection between the way they all want to approach Counter-Strike and Yakinda bringing in a lot of things and his spice to the game. They have excellent individuals. I think that is very, very clear. I think you have just Nitro that is just a bit under the others in terms of skill and presence on the server, but I think this is fair, assuming that he's the IGL. So to me, they should be performing a bit better, but maybe it's just like because they're still fairly new in a way, they don't know how to play against all the playstyle, and so they're not always on the same page about everything and how they want to approach it, and therefore that's what makes them a bit shaky, just like at the RMR. But you can see that they can fight against the big dogs because they have all the players, which is like a very important part that you need in Counter-Strike. You need to have the heavy hitters in your team to just go in and like smash people. And so yeah, I think for them to be top 8 is very realistic. I think they can even go far. I think they can go up to a final, to be honest, because if they click, they have the means to do it. But because of all the different matchups they're going to have and different play styles and how they have to approach it, and they have like a day to get adjusted to all of them, that's where I think the groups is going to be harder than the playoffs for them, weirdly enough. And so they need to manage to make it through that. I think they're going to feel more comfortable like the further they're going to be in the tournament. So that's how I see them. It's going to be a hard like group in a way, or like legend stage, but I can see them going very far just purely due to the quality of Counter-Strike they can bring in.
Is there a particular player, Hawker, watching the Challenger stage, preferably a player in a team that's now made it through to Legends, who you think just has not shown up yet?
I would say I've done a couple of their Outsiders games, and Kicker has been really disappointing because I was expecting him to be one of the pillars of the team. And it's always a bit weird with Outsiders because you always get the feeling that they don't even need to have their players show up to this incredible level to get wins. They always just seem to win these really close games, somehow just grind out some grimy rounds here and there. But Kicker has not actually played that well so far. And some of the rookies, the newer players like the Fames and the Norberts, are actually showing up and doing a decent job. And Kicker's meant to bring that bit of experience. It's a bit weird because his role has shifted quite a lot. He's doing a bit more of the entrying now on this team because when you lose a player like Yakinda, you have to switch up with some of the entrying duties. He's normally taken all of them. So Kicker's doing a lot of the entrying, and it doesn't seem like it fully fits him yet. So I still think Outsiders are going to scrape through this stage, but I am hoping that Kicker steps up a little bit. I've been a little disappointed by him.
B-Dog, how about you?
Just to build on that point quickly, I think Outsiders would benefit greatly if they varied up who entered a little bit. Like we saw at Rotterdam with Fame on Mirage, especially. He was being like the main point man, spearheading into the gunfights, and that was working out a lot better for Outsiders. And that actually changed up some of their strats because they were being a lot more aggressive in some moments you don't expect to normally see them in. And I feel like that variation could definitely get them over the line here. But I agree with you. I was watching Kicker, and I feel like where some of the roles have changed a little bit, he's not in his comfort zone. And at the same time, though, I feel like it's good that they have mixed it up a bit, because I feel like the fact that they are willing to accommodate and move Kicker's roles, and Kicker's been such a I agree with you. I almost think this pillar, because he's been in the team for such a long time. The fact that they're willing to move around and like adapt for Fame and Norbert, I think that's only good for this team, and I think it's enabled Flit to have a little bit more potential as well. Um, if in terms of players who haven't really stepped up to the occasion, I guess in terms of Fnatic, Fash has been a bit hit and miss. Like he's been a little bit inconsistent. He did show up in the 9Z game. I feel like he did very well, especially on Nuke, because he had some very impactful rounds on that CT side that helped them with the comeback. And I can understand why. Like it's a lot of these guys' first majors. It's the Fnatic lineup's an interesting one that we kind of touched on briefly before in the podcast. The fact that we said that we felt they were comfortable going to go through to the legend stage, and by and large, it was very shaky towards the end with the best of threes come out. You go up against Mouse, it's difficult. You go up against 9Z, they did win that game. They also had a comeback thrown in there because 9Z were gunning for it. But also Roy, I like there was some moments with Roy as well, especially in that Outsiders series. I know they didn't all play well in the Outsiders series, but Roy went a little bit absent, and I feel like in this team, Roy cannot go absent at all.
I'm going to change it up now because we've spoken about the Brazilians. We gave America some love. We talk about Europe all the time because the best Counter-Strike players tend to come from Europe. But also, I mean, despite the fact that Astralis isn't here, Nato, you mentioned this, that there are so many Danish players that are in this major. What are you feeding them there, and why are you all so good at Counter-Strike?
Well, it's clearly not all because I'm sitting here not at the major. But no, I'm the one. Whoa, I'm the one Danish guy who's not at the major. We have so few people, but feels like 17. That should be it. No, I think it's something that's also been discussed a lot. Maybe not in this podcast, but just overall. I guess I can give some insight. But like the whole Danish culture for Counter-Strike is, the way I understand it, completely different to most other countries. Like it started being like mainstream media Counter-Strike 3 years ago. That the regular news outlets, like even the government funded like news station kind of, and just everyone's interested, and typically that comes from you being very good at something. If you're a small country like Denmark, for example, and don't have so many people, it's breaking news whenever someone is the best in the world. I could probably off the top of my head already mention like 10 different Danish people from tennis and from swimming and from, when did we last get an Olympic gold medal and stuff like that, just because in Denmark it's really a big deal if someone is the best in the world. And I think the fact that we had Astralis being the best in the world for like 2 full years, winning everything, having 4 majors, it helped a lot as well, because they started coming more and more news out. People wanted to know more and more about Astralis. So I think that's been a great help, and now it's being broadcasted on TV all the time. And then for me, who is a Dane currently living in the Netherlands, I tell people, what do you do for work? And I say Counter-Strike, and they're like, what is that? Whereas if you're in Denmark, I remember when I was playing at Heroic, if I would go for a night out in the weekend, it would be no less than 3 times. Every time I would go out, that someone would come, hey, are you that guy from Heroic? It's just completely different. Where in Denmark, children, even early on in the school, are now, instead of starting at football practice, they're starting at esports, And it just seems like the fact that they've picked it up so early is just, it's a big deal. I think that's a big part of it. And another big part of it is also that we have so many good in-game leaders in Denmark. We have these players that bring up all the youth, where we see Sweden, for example, they don't have as many, I guess, like really tenured, strong in-game leaders. A lot of them have left, like Exist, who's now coaching, actually Heroic, which is a Danish team. And Sweden used to be on top of Counter-Strike only, 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe a little bit more at the start of CSGO, but they've completely fallen off, while Denmark is just getting bigger and bigger. So I think it's a combination between the sort of Scandinavian culture that has been so quick at picking up Counter-Strike, and then the fact that our in-game leaders in Denmark, they are just, the best in the world. And they are willing to also take those steps down the ladder when they get knocked down, try to build themselves up again. And you do that by fostering the youth talent in your country. or in your international team?
I have a few more questions around that, but I'm going to hold out for our last episode because we're coming to the point where I think it's now time to put you all on the spot. NBK, who's going through?
Who's going through? Do I have to name everyone?
Yes, we want your opinion on this.
Okay. I mean, I think the most obvious ones, first of all, are going to be FaZe, Navi. I think it's pretty straightforward. We expect them to be there. Don't want to be disappointed, but I think they're going to be there. I have high hopes for Mouse as well, so I think they're going to go through. For some reason, I have a feeling that Cloud9 is just going to pick it up and they're going to start really showing like what their actual level is. I think a lot of that relies on Axile, that has been not as good during the first stage, but like he started just climbing up and getting a bit better. Shiro is playing outstandingly well, and all the others are like following. So that's 4 teams. So I need 4 more.
Work for this one, Brent.
Yeah, there is. I have to say Vitality because of the Zayu factor. I think doesn't matter which game, he can just bring it over the line on his own. And so even though they're not playing well as a group, I think they just have what it takes to just grind the games out. I guess I'm going to throw in NIP, just looking good. I think having played with Alexi in the past, I know what his approach of Counter-Strike is. I think it fits insanely well with the Swedish players and their game style and the way they approach Counter-Strike. And I think this is a perfect match. And I think it showed just in the quality of some of the things. I think Hampus is a big point for them because he played so well unexpectedly in all their games that he needs to keep, now that's his standard pretty much, so that they perform well. So like that's going to be one of the things where he needs to be at that level now all the time pretty much in order for them to really be successful. But you know, why not? I like what they're showing. So NIP there. And then it gets really hard. I think Outsiders are going to be at that 2-2 game. Close to it. I think Liquid are going to make it. I don't know if I mentioned it already, but I think they're going to make it. I think Heroic are also pretty sound. I agree with a lot of things that Nato said. I think before, like in the mid-round, they were like the best team in the world at mid-rounds, especially City side. And I think they've lost that a little bit. Maybe a refresh was a big part of it. But yeah, like that balance seems a bit off for now, but they're still playing very good Counter-Strike. And then there's like one spot left for like a million teams. So it's just, you're just extremely hard to predict. But I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Spirit again just like comes in and surprises everyone and just straight up wins games. Like nobody really talks about them, but the individuals that they have and like the approach of Chopper that is like really putting the others in a good spot. And I see the guys from Spirit 5 hours a day on deathmatch every single day. So I wanted to see it paying off and just for them to be good. So it would mean like passing on teams like ENCE, Big, Furia, which is tough, but I want to throw something like that and just like put a Spirit in there, just like to conclude it. And like, you know, the teams like ENCE and Big just losing at like at the 2-2 stage or like 1-2 because like with shit matchups and stuff like that. I think to me that kind of makes sense, and I really want to believe in Spirit. I think their group makes a lot of sense and they're playing very well. So a lot of favorites and one not very favorite, like all in there and see what happens.
A bit unfair because all the others have had time now to quickly make their lists very sneakily while you were going through yours. B-Dog, who's going through?
Pretty much just the favorites, right? I mean, FaZe, Na'Vi, Liquid, Heroic. I've got Cloud9 there. I feel like they'll just kind of mentally reset at the Legends stage and they'll just keep on performing. Shiro, highest rate performer in Challenger, I think. And the fact that Axile's hitting insane jump shots out the window, anything's possible for Cloud9, right? I've got Outsiders sneaking it. I feel like they just will do it. I've also got Mouse. I didn't believe in them at all in the Challenger stage. I thought the pressure might get to them a little bit, but they've really thoroughly proved me wrong. I've been very impressed with how they've been doing. So I've got them going through. And then, yeah, I've put NIP in my 3-0 because I feel like NIP, I enjoy the way that they've now approached it with kind of Alexi B. I've always been a fan of Alexi B and how the way he kind of sets up the team structurally. So for me, I've got NIP as well.
So
Okay.
was it no vitality for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
There's not
Ooh,
enough room.
okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay, okay.
Why,
Well,
B-Dog?
like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I should have them in there, but there's just, I feel like when I did my pick'ems, it was 3 a.m. and I kind of put all the teams in there. So yeah, I should have Vitality in there. Who do I replace? Probably have them over Outsiders. Yeah.
All right.
You can't change your mind. It's too late.
Oh, fine. Fine. No Zywoo. Fine.
after Challenger, B-Dog's just like, I don't even care anymore. Like, it's just never going to go my way. That was the energy I was getting from you there.
Yeah,
Hawker,
true.
your top 8?
Yeah, I've got FaZe and Na'Vi. Like everyone else, it will be a travesty if neither of those teams make it. Then I do have Liquid. I just think they're the sort of team that will probably grind a fair bit for this sort of event. I remember ahead of Cologne, I think it was, they grinded super hard and their individuals was so on point. I expect the same here. Then I have Vitality. I think they've shown us their worst level and they were still grinding out results. So I expect the team play to get just a bit better. I also have Mouse. I just think everything's looking right for this team in terms of their players. And I'm really basing it a lot off of the level of players we're going to see here, because that can make such a difference in the early BO1s. So I think I do see Mouse going through. I still think Cloud9 are good enough. They should be able to right their wrongs. Shiro playing incredibly. Axel should step up. Then I have Outsiders. They're just going to win like their 2-2 game. They're just going to scrape through. They always seem to manage to do it. And also, Fame does look really good. He looks like the new X factor for this team, especially on the more puggy maps. I think he does provide a lot. And then I think I have one more, which I am going to go for Heroic. I just think they're another really well-rounded team. Someone like a Shush, for example, is like one of the most underrated players out there. He plays a lot of the hard spots, and he's a big reason why this team has such a stacked skill level across the entire roster. So Heroic will be my last pick. I do actually like the NBK Spirit shout, just because they're another team who I think come into the big events and just like NBK was saying, they just practice so hard individually that they're actually going to be really scary to go against. But I can't quite put them in, sadly, for me.
Nato, we're going to close this out with you. Your picks to go through?
Yeah, I'll give them to you first. I got FaZe, Na'Vi, I got Vitality, Cloud9. Don't think I need to really explain why. Then I have Liquid, I have Ns to go through, then I have NIP to go through, and then I feel like I'm missing someone. Oh, Heroic, of course. So those are my 8 picks. The reason I'm picking Vitality, for example, is we've seen it time and time again. I remember a few majors ago that Apex said that he told Zywoo, you better get your shit together now, we're going to be out of the major. And it just feels like that's every major for that team. Like, if Vitality are down in the dumpster, then someone, I don't know if it's Apex every time, but someone tells like Zywoo, like, get your shit together, and then he just starts performing like the best player in the whole world. So I am hoping that will happen once again. For the mouse that NBK specifically mentioned extra, I also hope that they make it through. I can't pick them, unfortunately, because I already have 8 teams to go through, but I can definitely see mouse making it. I also made a note in my pick-em video about Spirit that they always show up at the major, and exactly what NBK mentioned also, it seems like Chopper has had so many different lineups be successful at the major, and every time you think, I mean, I think he even got benched or something from Spirit, and then they actually picked him back up to build a new team, and then they still, had a phenomenal major last time. So Spirit are just a team. I don't rate them super highly individually, and just not even in general, but at the majors, I think they are super scary. So I think Spirit is a good shout for one of them that could make it as well. But obviously, I'm going to stick by my list of 8 teams, but Spirit and Mouse, they could make it as well, I think.
That's our lists. I don't get to make a list. If I say I don't want to, because I just don't want to make those life choices. But I'm sure you've got a list, so let us know what they are in the comments below. We will be back next week. We'll unpack all of this. We'll be able to chat a little bit more about what we're about to see go down at the Rio Major. Also, I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, everyone, that Hawker does this from the beach because he is in Rio. So we'd love to see you in the sand and sea. Thank you so much, gents, for chatting, for sharing your knowledge. And of course, make sure that you're following Pinnacle Esports here on YouTube, all over their social media, so you don't miss any of our thoughts and another roundtable. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.